Well, here it is, the much anticipated Char-Broil Performance 780 charcoal grill. I bought this from Walmart off their website. It was a closeout special, $189. By the time they put the taxes on there, it came out to about $202, but I got free shipping. Came out of California. So they didn't really process the order till the following week. You know, when I placed an order on July 12th, which was a Friday, it wasn't until Tuesday that I saw any activity, and it just arrived. It's Monday the 22nd, and what we're going to do is take this guy into the house and start the assembly, and I'll document that. There's a lot of chatter on the internet about how long it takes to assemble this thing. A lot of people were having trouble, so I'm a fairly handy guy and I got plenty of tools, so we'll see what it takes for me to do it, and I'll report back. Got to go in the house because we got a threat of thunderstorms here in a couple hours and I don't want to be caught out here. So we will check back with you in a little bit. Okay, so we've got everything inside and unboxed. Got it laid out here. It took, I don't know, a good 20 minutes or so just to get everything out of the box. We do have a couple of casualties, however. The biggest is here on the hood, and you can see where it's dented in pretty good. When it was in the box, it was laying down like this, so I could see somewhere during shipping, if somebody let the box flop over, guess what's going to happen? So I'm going to contact Char-Broil and report the damage, but I'm going to also try to take a rubber mallet and see if I can beat that out. It's just cosmetic. It's not going to affect any of the mechanics or the performance, but it's still, when you pay a couple $100 for something, you expect it to be brand new. The other casualty, and I believe this is the bottom of the unit, it took a hit. All right, you'll notice that this side's pretty straight. Over here, this side is bowed out. I believe this is where the legs attach. And then this all started when I noticed that the paint was chipping right here. So that thing, you can kind of see how out of kilter it is. So once again, I'm gonna, right here, this is supposed to be a right angle. It's not. So it took a hit. It was on one of the corners of the box, and once again, during shipping, if somebody ram something up against it, this is what's going to happen. So I'm going to report this to Char-Broil also, but I believe I can take a mallet, rubber mallet, and beat it and make it fit. But I'm just going to go on record with them boys to let them know, because it is a common complaint. If you'll get on the Char-Broil website and look at the comments, there's a lot of people complaining about this stuff being dented, and some cases pretty drastically, where things like the ash pans falling out and other assorted complaints. This is the charcoal grate, which supposedly is some kind of proprietary or patented design. It's got air inlets on each one of these ribs, and your charcoal lays in between, and supposedly that helps the charcoal burn evenly. This is the mechanism for lowering and raising the charcoal pan. I think this is one of the sides. That's the other side. We've got a handle. This is the front, where you can go in and manage your charcoal. Let's see, those can't be the sides, because this is the side where, this is one of the sides where the air inlets are. So we'll figure all that out in a minute. We're going to get out the instruction manual. Got a box of hardware here with all kinds of little thermometers and our wheels and assorted hardware. We've got our, these are supposedly porcelain coated cast iron grates. And then we've got our legs here and a little packet of hardware, screws and nuts and whatnot. There's our, people call this a warming grate. It's the thing that's elevated and opens and closes with the door. So that's that. I'm gonna contact Char-Broil right now before I start assembly and see what they got to say. All right, we'll continue on shortly. Okay, I've got everything laid out here. As I showed earlier, I've got out my assembly instructions. I've got my hardware laid out and separated in little piles. The instructions say you need a screwdriver and adjustable wrench. Well, if that's all you got, that's all you got. I'm using a 7/16 socket, and I've got a fixed wrench here in case I need it. A pair of needle nose pliers if I need to, put some of these little clips on. Got a flashlight in case I need that. And what I'm going to do is, I'm not counting the amount of time it took to unpack and separate everything. What we're going to do is, I've got my phone set up here with a stopwatch, and I'm going to time the actual assembly. And if I need to take a break for whatever reason, I'll stop the stopwatch and do what I got to do, and then I'll come back. So what we're after is just the total amount of time that it's going to take to assemble this thing. And I'm not going to record any of that. I'm just going to go ahead and do it, and I'll report back later. Okay, I'm stopping here for a moment just to show what progress I've made. It took me 18 minutes to do steps 1, 2, and 3. And step 1 is assembling the fronts and the sides. Step 2 is putting the handle on the front door where the charcoal grate is. And step 3 is putting the bracket on for the hinge, for the door hinge. So I just wanted to stop and point out a couple of things. Hopefully this will help somebody who's trying to do the same thing. The instructions state that the front and the rear flange must overlap the side. So this side goes up underneath here. Okay? Alright, that's the first thing. The other thing is, it's only showing 2 screws going in there, and I know it's hard to see, but the bottom hole, we skip one, and then the next one to the top. So it's only showing 2 screws, and I'm assuming later on in the process we're going to use these holes for something else. So that's important to pay attention to. Okay. Now, when it came to mounting the handle, it was a little trial and error, but you can see, I don't know if you can see that or not, but I oriented the handle to where you basically have to pull it straight down to close. Okay. These dampers, I had to stop and go get my drill driver, because on the back side is one of those locking nuts with a piece of nylon in it or whatever it is, and I could not hold a number 2 screwdriver and get enough torque on it to get that nut to go. So what I ended up doing was getting the drill driver and then holding the nut with a wrench, and then I was able to get it secure that way. So good luck. So anyway, that's the progress for steps 1, 2, and 3. And the other thing to note is in the pack that the little hinges come in. There's 2 wide ones and 2 narrow ones, and the narrow ones will go slide in there, just like that. I put the wide ones onto the back of the unit. It didn't necessarily tell me to do that, but I figured I was going to put the beef here where it's most sturdy, and hopefully that will work out when I go to mount the hood. Okay, we're going to go on to the next steps, and that took 18 minutes and a few seconds to get this far, so we'll see how it goes from here. Okay, so here we are at our next set of steps, 4, 5, and 6. 4 is assembling the legs to the cooker base, and 5 is putting the bottom shelf on, and then 6 is putting on the wheels. So previously I had mentioned that it was important when you were assembling the sides and the front and the back to pay attention to where you put those screws. And I mentioned there was 2 extra holes. Well, this is what the holes were for. There's threaded studs on these legs, and so you insert the bolts in that way, and that takes care of those extra holes. Okay. The next thing was mounting the shelf, and it's important that you pay attention to the legs. They're marked, left front, left back, and right front and right back, and so forth, because this particular leg right here is extended up a little bit from the shelf to make room for the axle and the big wheel, whereas over here the shelf meets up cleanly with the bottom of the leg. Okay, and it was pretty simple putting on the wheels. However, the instructions show some kind of little clip that you use, and I'm not sure if it's it looks like it goes through these 2 holes, and I guess it's made to be a wrench where you can tighten up this little base, but I can't find that clip anywhere, so I'm just going to get a pair of channel locks and grab hold of it and tighten that up, and then these guys can swivel around. I think we'll be fine. So that's that. We're getting ready to, there's a couple spacers and washers and little clips on the big wheels, and now we're getting ready to flip it back over so that we can move on to step 7. So for me to do all that, I'm up at 38 minutes, which is 20 more minutes from the first session, and I'll quite simply state that a large amount of time was fumbling around trying to get the screws to meet up with the threaded studs that are on the back side of the leg and on the little bottom here. So I probably took up a great amount of time just fiddling around trying to find the holes. Otherwise, that went pretty cleanly, so we're going to move on. Hey, I'm going to stop right here and take a minute to point out something before you get into trouble. Step 8 is the shelf installment, and the shelves are numbered 26 and 27, although mine did not have any stickers on them, so through looking at it, there's a left and a right, and you'll note that there's an angle right here. All right, that's got to mate up to the front. right here where there's an angle. So when we mount it up, it'll mate up like that. So just pay attention and note that you got to match those guys up, a left and a right, before you go too far. All right, I'm gonna move on. Okay, we are 55.5 minutes into our little adventure, assembling the Char-Broil grill, and the last step was step number 8, and that's mounting the 2 side shelves. And I did mention that there is a left and a right to them, because it's got to match up to that miter right there. And it took me a little longer because one of my shelves had a bent flange on it, and it was hard for me to get this little corner screw up in there, so I had to beat and fuss with it for a few minutes. But I'm just totaling that in with all the other time, because I feel like anybody else that's going to try to do this is going to run into these little obstacles here and there, so it's only fair. So our next step is to mount the brackets for the charcoal grate lifting mechanism. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on that, and we'll see how much time that takes. Okay, we're at a minute and almost, an hour and 11 minutes roughly. In our last session, we installed the crank handle for the adjustable charcoal grate, and we installed the bracket, which basically was a couple of little brackets that mount here. This rod supports the unit, and then you have a little piece of metal here. It's hard to see. I know it's hard to see. Let me see if I can get a flashlight on this. But you can see there's a little pin with a stub with a cotter pin in it, so you got to kind of finagle putting that together, and it's not easy. It's tight quarters. If you have fat fingers, you might be saying some Sunday school words, but anyway, that was our last step, and that was steps 10 and 11. So now we're going to move forward with the final assembly of the hood and the dampers and all that. So we'll see how long it takes us to get that done. Check back with you in a minute. Okay, here we are at 1 hour and almost 29 minutes. Let's go ahead and just call it and say it took me an hour and a half to do this in round numbers. The last step was doing the assembly work to the hood. So I put the dampers on, I put the handle on, mounted the thermostat, thermometer, the other damper, and then on the back side we had to mount the hinge. And one thing I'd like to point out to anybody doing this is don't tighten any of this until after you assemble it and get the pin in there, and then you can button everything down. Okay, earlier in the steps I mounted this to the base, and I tightened it down. I ended up having to loosen it anyway. So just leave everything a little bit loose, fit it together, and then when you're happy you can tighten it all up. The other step was mounting the upper grate, or the warming grate, or whatever you want to call it. So that was nothing. It's just basically sliding it in these holes here, and then there's a little cotter pin that holds it together, and it does that. We're happy. And then we've got our adjustable charcoal grate, so we're happy with that. in that hour and 30 minutes, I still, you know, you still got to take stickers off. I've got some stickers on some of the legs and other parts. But once again, to recap, the assembly time was basically with everything unwrapped and laid out and ready to go. I did not preview the instruction manual. I basically, when I started the timer, that's when I started looking at the instruction manual and just went from there. Did have to stop a few times to take phone calls and whatnot, but I halted the timer when that happened. So it took me an hour and a half. If I were building these all day long, I bet you I could get them done in an hour now that I know what to do. Some people on the internet are reporting that it takes them a couple hours to do it, and I remember reading a couple of people were having a lot of trouble and it took them up to 3 hours. So I guess it depends on the fit and finish and how much you got to finagle around with everything. But if you have the right tools and you're a little bit handy, I think you can get it whipped out in pretty short amount of time. There are a lot of parts, and it just so happened everything that was in the package was used. I didn't end up with any missing hardware or any spare hardware. So Char-Broil did a pretty good job with that. All right, well, that's the wrap on the install. Hope everybody enjoyed it. I'm going to do a couple of additions later. I'll probably change the thermometer out, put in a higher quality one, a little more accurate, probably a True Tail or something like that, and then we'll see. One other thing I want to mention is a lot of the parts in here have been oiled up. For example, the assembly for the that raises the charcoal grate up, it is really oily and sticky. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to kind of season this guy up. You know, put in a load of charcoal and cook it out, and it'll burn that oil off. You don't want to throw food on there immediately. You need to burn this thing out, let it roll for, you know, several hours. And hopefully I'll make a little video when I do that, follow up with it. All right, once again, hope everybody enjoyed. Hope you learned something. Got any comments, please leave them, and we'll talk to you later.